the name of the Father, and the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Sunday of preparation. We are in the day to prepare for 55 days of fasting, prayers, and giving. Today, the Lord is speaking to us about the journey. He's giving us a summary, what we need to pay attention to. There's a story that comes to mind whenever I read this passage, and there is something to learn from this story that's very powerful. So, this is a true story of two friends who were godly. They pray together, they go to church, they're very close. Apparently, it was in the time of under the Roman Empire. And something happened between them. They fought and they had a big argument, and one of them got very offended from the other, and he was hurt. Then that one that was hurt and was offended, the Roman soldiers caught him and brought him to stand before the governor. As he was waiting for trial, his friend came to him in the prison and said, "My friend, my brother, please forgive me. Seems like you're going to be a martyr. You're going to die. And you're going to be a great saint, and I want to have your blessing before you die." And the man said, "No. What you have done to me is unforgivable." He said, "I beg you, please. I might not have another chance to talk to you. Just forgive me." And he said, "I don't think what you have done can be forgiven." And the friend left the prison sad. And the next day, when he was brought before the governor, he couldn't give a witness for Christ. He actually denied him. That story is written for us to talk about what the subject of the gospel today is about. In Lent, and it seems like this, and I want you to pay attention to this. It's in the Sermon on the Mount. There are 3 chapters in the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5, 6, and 7. The whole middle chapter, 6, is dedicated to the talk about the 3 offering of a Christian. What we Christians are supposed to offer to God. And it seems like against the common teaching. You learn that prayer is for you to feel happy, to be good, to have peace. It's true, but that's not the goal of prayer. Pay attention again to the saying. It's not actually the goal of prayer that we get. We actually, in the prayer, we offer. How does Jesus say it? Let's read it with you again. So this has to be clear in our mind. And he said it yesterday in the last night Vespers Gospel. He speaks about giving, but let me talk about prayer. And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites. He's talking about the Pharisees. For they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret place will reward you openly. What does that sound like? Try to understand this, Jesus saying. Pray to your Father and your Father only. If you want to receive a reward, pray to Him only. What does that sound like? And then he said, don't even ask for what you need. He knows what you need, and He gave us our Father. He puts it between the giving and the fasting. So there is giving, prayer, fasting. And the 3 are offerings to God. You remember the song? Maybe you don't hear it, you didn't hear it before. Let my prayer arise as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as an evening sacrifice. So what does the psalmist and Jesus tell us about prayer? They are an offering, a sacrifice to God. When you go to your bedroom and you're alone there with God, Offering your prayer to God, it's an offering. There's even more dramatical scene from last. I want to go to Vespers and let you hear this. I think it's in Vespers last night. We read it. And I want you to think about this also. Sometimes we miss this. Is it this morning? Yeah, it's this morning. I'm sorry, it's Matins. We read it in the Matins. Let me go there so you actually read this one more interesting passage from Jesus. And in the Gospel of Matins, we read this passage from Luke. We're going to come to this subject about what we do to have this offering accepted. Now, listen to this. This is Jesus speaking to us this morning, preparing for Lent. And which of you, he's talking to us, having a servant, plowing or tending sheep, working out in the field the whole day, when he come home after finishing his daily work, will say to him, "Come at once and sit down to eat"? Will he say that? What would he say if we have a servant like this? But will he not rather say to him, "Prepare something for me for my supper, and gird yourself and serve me till I have eaten and drunk, and afterward you will eat and drink"? Does he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I think not. What does Jesus mean? What does he mean by that? He's giving us a parable. Let's think about it. He said, if you are a master and you have a servant and you send them to work in the field, and they work hard the whole day, they're in the sun, they're sweating, they're tired, they're hungry. When they come home, would the master say, I know it doesn't seem like very merciful, but that's the custom. The work of the servant is not finished until he prepared food for, that's part of the daily work. There's nothing really strange about that. You think of it as something, harsh. No, it's not. It's part of his work. What does Jesus mean? Now you understand the story. What does he mean? There's only one meaning to the story. Is that you go and serve God the whole day in your work or your school or whatever, but when you come home and say, I'm tired, I can't really pray. There is a personal service here. That you're going to have to stand before the master, prepare something for him personally to eat. You've been working with the sheep, with the field, with the grain, with whatever, but then when you come home, it is more intimate, more personal service. What's that? It's prayer. Would you be doing something great if you do this? Or if you don't do it, what would happen? You're actually lacking in your service, in your work. So I want us to think again about prayer as, it's what? It's a service, it's an offer. I go to the best master because I love him. I love my master. He is my master, he's my king. I love him. So for actually to offer myself, I am the food. In a way, I am offering myself to God as a child offers themselves to the parents. Imagine a child come from school and he sees his mother turn his face and go to his room to play with his PlayStation or watch YouTube. How would the mother feel? Very sad. This is what I take from you after all that I do for you, she would say. That's more closer to us example. So we are actually, according to Jesus, we're supposed to have our prayers ready when we come home after a day of work or before we put our head on the pillow. What I'm trying to say is, when Jesus spoke about fasting, prayer, and giving, he spoke about 3 gifts, 3 offerings. So let's just start with this. Lent is the season dedicated to intense practice of giving, fasting, and praying. In the school, every time they come to, I'm going to try to start this with the kids younger, it's easier. Every time they come on Friday, they are supposed to bring money with them to put it in the box in the church. That's part of their gift. And there's a verse in the Old Testament that says, Do not appear before me empty-handed. That's a verse from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses. Do not appear before me empty-handed. And don't think it is nothing that doesn't belong to the New Testament, because Jesus saw the widow who came to the temple, and I think she was doing this. There was a widow who came to the temple who has no money, only have 2 pennies. You know the story. Why did she do that? Think about it. Why a widow who has nothing except those 2 pennies? She could buy a loaf of bread and eat. Why would she have to put those? Because she needed to come to the temple to pray. She needs God. She's coming to the temple and she doesn't want to come empty. You understand? She's not going to the temple to give, but if she's going to go to the temple, she will have to give. She needed God. So every time we come to church, there has to be something in the box. Has to be something we give to God. We don't really come empty. So we teach that to the kids. If the kids forget or they don't have, I ask Miss Mitri to give them change as they come through the door. So they come through the door and they have something to put in the box, so they don't really appear empty-handed. That's something we need to learn. To come to church, anytime we come to church, put anything. Get $1 out. Anything. But don't come to the church empty-handed. The second gift that Jesus spoke about is fasting. He says, your internal fasting, your hunger, is an offering to God. And don't let anybody else watch you as you're fasting and so like hungry and down and weak. Don't let people see that. We just celebrated the feast of departure of Pope Kyrillos. And it's known about him, he used to fast every day in his life. He would eat, he would fast the whole day, especially in the Lenten, and he comes at night and eats some bread, salt, and cumin. Du'a. He used to eat du'a after he finished his day. And that's why in Egypt we love du'a, just something that you do with a lot of some craftiness, some smartness that you do, nice tasting du'a. It's just salt and spices, but not hot. So the 3 gifts are prayer, fasting, and giving. Jesus speaks about them as the activity, as we begin our Lent. But here is something in the readings that's very clear, very clear. Those 3 gifts, listen to me and listen carefully, are not going to be accepted without a precondition, which is, you've heard the readings, you know what that is. What's the precondition for prayer to be accepted, for fasting to be accepted, for giving to be accepted? There is a precondition. That's just, it's in all the Gospels, by the way. So I continue the Matthew's Gospels here. This is the Matthew's Gospel. I'm going to have to read it with you. Take heed to yourselves, as your brother sins against you, rebuke him. And if he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in a day, and 7 times in a day returns to you saying, I repent, I'm sorry, you shall forgive him. There is a condition. Now we go to this is Matins, let's go to the Vespers. So we can see actually this is extremely important and as clear as daylight in the Gospels of the Preparation Sunday. In St. Mark, when he speaks, he said, Jesus answered and said to them, have faith in God. And he talks about faith. And he said, therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. And be careful now, whenever, I like this word, whenever, means what? Every time. Whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. We're not going to go far. Just look at our Father. You have 8 requests. 8 requests. Hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. Deliver us, do not lead us into temptation. Deliver us from the evil one. 7. But one of those 7 is, forgive us as we forgive. And Jesus gave an example. about that. And he said very, very surely, if you don't forgive, no forgiveness. There is another place where he says when you offer your offerings and you remember there's something against somebody, you also need to ask forgiveness. You forgive, but you also need to ask forgiveness. We call that reconciliation. So there is this 3 offerings, and one of them Jesus marked. He said, when you pray, every time you pray, you have to ask to forgive. You have to forgive. Is that easy? Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is very difficult to forgive. But you know what? The Lord doesn't leave us alone. He's not going to leave us alone. Let me get to the pieces where he actually talks about this. He talked about it many times. The Lord did not leave this one alone. I want to start with Matthew 5, the same place we read the piece of today. It's in the Sermon on the Mount. And in Matthew 5, in verse 23, he said, therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, we talked about the 3 gifts, and there remember that your brother has something against you. I am not the offended, I'm actually the offender. I remember that. I've done something to someone. That's not nice. I hurt somebody's feeling. I'm bringing my gift, so whether I'm going to put money in the box, whether I'm going to offer prayer, whether I'm going to fast, I remember there's something I've done that's not nice. See, John Chrysostom here says, in John Chrysostom says something very beautiful. He says, look at the humility of Christ, the humility of God. He said, don't worry about what you're bringing. Leave it here. As if God is going to stand and watch over your gift until you go and ask forgiveness. Just leave it here. And go your way, first be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. You know how we get the urbana and the wine and the water, and we stand at the door? Imagine that we are actually standing here, all of us, and we're having the bread and the wine and the water, and we're all waiting to offer it, and then we start remembering that we are actually not okay. In the school liturgy on Friday, for this reason, I make sure that before we offer the bread and wine, everybody asks forgiveness for whatever happened during the week. They go around. If you see them in the liturgy, the kids go around. Everybody's asking forgiveness. Forgive me. They ask forgiveness from each other and from their teachers. And if their parents attending the liturgy, they ask forgiveness from the parents. So that we can be offering our gift according to the condition Jesus put. We need to think this way. I cannot think of myself as a disciple of Christ and not listening to what he's saying. This is crazy. Then it's a pretense. It's hypocrisy. Jesus said you cannot have something against somebody or somebody have something against you and okay to offer. Before you do that, you have to reconcile. That's reconciliation. We call it reconciliation time. And again, after they finish doing this, you see them sprawling all over the church, talking to each other gently and quietly. And after we get done, I read, absolution. We all get forgiven. And for the same reason, before Abuna is going to offer your offering, which is the body and blood of Christ, I stand at the door of the altar and I say what? I have sinned. Forgive me for Christ's sake. Why? Because I'm about to offer the greatest offering ever. And it's your offering and mine, not just mine. So this is what Jesus said about before we begin Lent. We have to do this. This is the condition for those 3 gifts to be accepted: the fasting, the praying, and the giving. And then he said, listen to this. This is important. So what if I cannot forgive? And we're going to have multiple passages about this. This is not one passage. This is how important it is. Jesus spoke about it a lot. I'm telling you, it's one of the things that he spoke about a lot. He actually says, if you don't forgive, you will not be forgiven. And he gave an example. You know what the story he said? He said there was a king, and he had many servants. And he gave money, lent money to one of the servants that he had. But that same servant had lent money to another servant. So the king lent him, and he lent money to the other. The king lent him almost $500,000. That's how it seems like. The man borrowed from the king $500,000. But that man gave $50 to his friend as a as a lend, as a loan. So the king said, bring this servant with the $500,000, I need my money. And the servant said, I beg you, Lord King, I have nothing, nothing. My wife and my children are hungry. I have nothing to give you. I beg you. So the king, tender-hearted, said, okay, I forgive you. He came out from the king's palace and went on his road, and he went to look for his friend with the $50. And he held him this is what Jesus said, he held him like this. He said, where's my money? And he said, I have nothing now, just wait on me, give me some time, I'll give you the money. He said, no, I want it today. And he said, he started dragging him going to the court. He wants his money, either that or he's going to throw him in jail. The other servants saw this, and they went to the king and said, the one that you just forgave $500,000 is actually holding his brother by the neck, wanting $50. He said, bring him back. So they brought him back, and guess what will happen? He doesn't deserve to be forgiven. So what Jesus is saying to us, this is a parable. What's he saying? Who owe more? We owe more to each other, or we owe more to God? Definitely we owe more to God, because we were forgiven by the blood of his son. Jesus was paid as a ransom, as a price for what we have done against God. When we broke the commandment, when we acted like the devil. And God forgive us. So when I hold a grudge against someone, if I put that comparison, it's not fair. That's why we stand and pray and say, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Actually this as is not fair at all. There is no as in this. There is no similarity at all. We were forgiven a lot, but we need to forgive little. You remember that? I remember that story about one of the bishops, I think, or a priest, who had a big problem between two brothers, and one of the brothers did not want to forgive. And the priest said, okay, and he was like obstinate, I'm not going to listen to you, not listening to anybody. He needs to be punished. So the priest said, okay, if there is nothing to talk about, let's stand and pray. Stood to pray, and what did he say? He said, Our Father. And when he was saying Our Father, he said, and do not forgive us our trespasses, because we do not want to forgive anybody. And I said, no, Abuna, that's not how the prayer goes. I said, that's what you just said. You don't want to be forgiven? And Jesus said it very clearly, if you don't want to forgive, you're not going to be forgiven. So what did Jesus say actually? In Matthew 18, he said this. In verses 20, actually from 15. Here. Let us read this together. Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. This means I could not forgive him. There's certain things that's very deep and very hurtful. It's very difficult just to forgive and let go, especially if it keeps repeating. So maybe, okay, so first one I say, maybe he didn't mean, maybe she didn't mean what she did. I forgive her. But then I can't really say that. It seems like she exactly knew what she was doing. Maybe she didn't pay attention. So what I do, let her pay attention. I go to her and tell her, did you know that you did this? So the response I expect is, I'm sorry, I didn't know that it hurted you. If that is the case, I feel satisfied, good. And if she says sorry or he says sorry, I am appeased. But if he will not hear, he says, no, I did this, I know I did this, you don't need to tell me about it, and I'm going to do it again and again. They said, in this case, you take one or two with you. You have to take people with you to really bear witness to what's going on. So that the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word may be established, because this will be a case in the church. They will have to go to the bishop. Listen to me. Then if he doesn't listen to the 2 witnesses, which should be neutral, by the way. By the way, conditions. When you go to rebuke somebody, when you go to talk to somebody, you have to be alone. Don't do it in front of everybody. Don't embarrass them. When you take two witnesses, don't take your friends. Take some people who are neutral. They're not really his friends or your friends. They're neutral. They love you each equally. But they don't listen to he doesn't listen to the two witnesses. What should I do? I take him to the bishop. Usually the priest is not the one who is able to do this. I'm going to tell you what will happen. If he does not listen to the bishop, if the person does not listen to the bishop will have to do what? That's a very harsh one. Excommunicate them. يقطعوا. طب why? Basically, the person who doesn't listen to the church, which is in the person of the apostles and their successors, he's saying, I don't belong. I do not belong. Here is something for us to remember. I, as a person in the church, have no authority to excommunicate anyone. Listen carefully for this one. Listen carefully. We are one because we take communion together. That baptism and that communion, according to St. Paul, makes us one. I have no choice. I'm not given a choice. For someone to be out of this bond, who has to say it? The church leaders. They have to say it after examining with witnesses. It's a court-like. One of the bishop's jobs is a judge. He is the head of the clerical council. So they have to have witnesses. It has to be debated and deliberated so that eventually someone will be out of the church. Then you don't need to talk to them. But don't take it on yourself to do that. So I have no options, actually. And some people come to me and say, Abuna, we try. The rebuking doesn't do anything. Get two witnesses. Let's go for it. Because to hold a grudge against somebody and come and take communion, don't do that. Don't do it. That's not something good. Don't ever do that. It's like Judas, who doesn't want to bring his heart out. So there are 6 steps of forgiveness. I'm going to call them 6 steps, and let's count them quickly so we can wrap up. 1, forgive. Just forgive. Because you know you've been forgiven. And I do this a lot. I say, Lord, I know how much you forgive me. I personally know how much I owe you. But sometimes it's very difficult to actually, especially with repeated things. I give the benefit of the doubt and say, number 2, I wait for them to take their time to come and say sorry. They don't say sorry. I couldn't forgive. They didn't come to say sorry. I go to them and tell them, you've offended me. You've done this thing. Did you really mean it? If they say sorry, that's fine. If they don't say sorry, I bring with me a couple of people, and they don't respond to those couple of people. I take them to the bishop, and he doesn't listen to the bishop. I've had it happen actually one time in my life, and as a priest, there was a problem between a husband and wife, and the wife was actually bitterly grieved by the husband. And the bishop was at the time, Mbabula, he called the husband 2 times. And he said to him, I need you to come here so we can actually talk about this and try to find a way out. And the man did not respond. The 3rd time, Mbabula said, if you do not come this week, consider yourself excommunicated. And he did. He never entered the church again. So the number 6 is to consider him as a heathen or a publican. So these are Jesus' plan for us. Why is Jesus doing this? Why is he asking us to go through all this big deal of reconciliation? Why? 1, it's very important. To him, it's a must. It's included in our prayer of our Father. The second thing is, he knows that in the church we have to be one. There is no way around that. You cannot have it. You have to actually put the weight of Christ in this and say, no matter how someone hurt me, no matter how someone offended me, if I put the weight of Christ against that, which one will win? It's up to you to decide. It's up to you. It's for the sake of Christ. That's why I say, forgive me. I have sinned, forgive me for? What do I say? أخطيت سامحوني من أجل. That's the weight. The heavy weight of Christ is in the forgiveness. We cannot take it on ourselves. It's not our business. This is Jesus saying it to us. So today, I'm going to finish so I don't get you here too long. 1, you're cleaning your refrigerators and cupboards with from all the meat, the cheese, like the little YouTube that they did in Canada. Take away your meat, take away your lahma. It is fasting time. Have you seen that? If you type in YouTube, the fasting trailer, Coptic fasting trailer, did it in Canada, I think in Mississauga. So they said that it begins with the Joker from the movie The Dark Knight, and he's speaking his own language. Take away your lahma, take away your cheese. It's fasting time. So it is your fasting time. But to do it actually right, and as Jesus wants us to do it, as you cleaning your fridge and you clean your cupboard, you also clean your heart by forgiveness. That's the key thing that the Gospels and the readings of today is about. Forgiveness, to begin offering our true offering. And then prepare yourself for an extra liturgy during the week. Fasting a little bit, if you can fast more, maybe a couple of hours more. If you cannot fast until like 3 p.m., maybe fast until noon. If you cannot fast until noon, then skip breakfast and take a brunch. Whatever you can do. If you cannot give up any, like all the proteins, give up a couple of items. Maybe I actually can give up meat and maybe keep eggs. Some people have their medicines or their lifestyle cannot really go vegan, all the way vegan. So we can actually restrict our meals and diet to certain things and offer it to God as my offering of fasting to God. But for anything you do, make more prayer time. Whatever you do, make more prayer time. And that is the key. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.